That was not the plan.
I don't understand you. You have a knee brace on, you have like freaking heels on, you don't have a knee brace on, you have flat shoes. I'm confused.
She keeps you guessing.
She does.
I mean, hey,
But that was an astute observation. Heels and a knee brace. It kind of don't go
None of my business, but it also confuses me.
Is it big circles or small circles?
No, it's please wait.
circles.
It's please wait.
It's a conundrum, you,
So,
you
I
Vivian.
mean, I don't need it.
Listen, I wore the brace because I had to.
That was
I wanted to.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna open my notebook. I'm just gonna.
I broke my knee trying to jump over stairs.
There she is.
And then I played it off
See,
for a
mine
whole
works.
2 hours before I was like, no, yeah,
You're welcome.
there she go.
Although 9 times out of 10 I have like no battery.
I'm stronger than I
9
thought I
times out of
was.
10 I have no battery.
I love,
Like I'll look at the
I
phone,
love
oh,
that
look at
positive mindset. That's amazing.
Good evening, everyone. At this time, I would like to call the January 2024 work session meeting of the Board of Education to order. We will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda presented before us this evening. May I have a motion?
So moved, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. Second?
Second, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Sorry.
The approval of the work session agenda motion carries. So good evening again, everyone. The purpose of this work session is to discuss our thoughts around the superintendent hiring process, as well as establish a baseline that will formally inform our succession plan. Due to the nature of this session, we have excused the superintendent from joining us at this meeting. We have 2 charges tonight. Our board attorney, Douglas Gerhardt, welcome, to present and describe the various processes and options to select a superintendent and share the pros and cons of each. And our second charge for the board is to discuss our individual thoughts and positions about how we should proceed in relation to the superintendent hiring process. We will begin with Mr. Gerhardt's presentation shortly, but I ask that we, the board, wait until he has completed the presentation before asking any questions or sharing comments. Please welcome again Mr. Gerhardt, the board's attorney, who will present on the pros and cons of the different superintendent hiring processes.
Thank you, Bernice, and I appreciate you all having me here. Is my volume okay? So what I thought I would do is outline. I don't have a presentation for you to view on the screen, so I guess that means you sort of have to look at me or listen and not look at me. So I apologize. I don't have anything more entertaining than that. But what I thought I would do is kind of outline the 2 paths, one of which you will desire to take in terms of filling the superintendent vacancy that we'll have as of May 1st. And these are both fairly well worn in terms of school districts using them as I get into it a little bit. It is not a surprise, I think you've probably all heard this before, that hiring a superintendent is really the most important job for Board of Education. You're hiring your CEO, you're the key staff leader of the entire school district, educationally and from the business side of it as well. Both options that are available to you allow you to do that very effectively. In general terms, you can, a very traditional, one way to do it is to engage a search. I think everybody here is familiar with that. I apologize, I'm trying to play tennis with my eye contact. There was a search done when the current superintendent was brought on, and I think previous superintendents, you've done a search. The other option available to you is to appoint from within. That is also commonly done in school districts. And I don't really have data points to quantify how frequently one is used over another, but from experience working with small school districts and large school districts, I would characterize Schenectady as a large school district. It is certainly more common to do a search in a smaller district, and one of the reasons for that is one way that you would sort of grow your own and hire internally is when you have a fairly robust district leadership team and executive team, multiple assistant superintendents, deputy superintendents, who may be certified to be a school district leader, as well as aspire to that role and have worked with the superintendent in the major issues affecting the district. A smaller district tends not to have that, and it's often that there's a superintendent and then principals of buildings, so the in-house team of people or pool of applicants that might be used to be considered to elevate to the superintendency in a small district just is less. You don't really have that here. You have a very robust executive team. So I have seen both done very successfully in terms of a search and in terms of hiring within. I worked with a district for a number of years in the Hudson Valley where the superintendent came in and hired a deputy superintendent who also then hired an assistant superintendent. The superintendent retired, the deputy took over as superintendent, the assistant became deputy, and then when the second superintendent left, the deputy became the superintendent, and that succession plan was really, beautifully executed and done very well and it ended up being a number of years, and that's what they did, and there's other examples of that. Specific to Schenectady, I would say, and to be as neutral and fair as possible, what I did was I tried to look at the pros and cons of each. So sort of made a column of, what are the pros and cons of doing an internal succession plan, superintendent, versus doing a search. So I will share with you what I came up with in terms of some of those pros and cons, and these are just sort of my back of the envelope kind of notes on this. In terms of and I've characterized this as internal/succession, meaning someone who's currently here becomes a superintendent, so it's the internal person. The positives, there can be a seamless transition because you're working with someone who's currently employed in the district. That person can then work directly with the superintendent over the next, what will end up being, 3 months, February, March, April, until Mr. Solar exits. There's quick understanding among not only the leadership team, but the faculty, the staff, what's it going to look like under the new leader, who it is. That'll be able to be announced quickly. The succession plan is well known, and there's a benefit, I think, in the staffing that we know who the person is, we understand how that's going to work, and I think that's a positive in that regard. Another positive is that there's uninterrupted continuation of work that's ongoing, and whether we look at the building project or some of the programs that you've initiated, I'm sure there's countless endeavors underway here that have been underway under the current superintendent. You hire someone internally, those, again, seamlessly can transition and continue very effectively with largely the same group of folks you got now. I think I said this a minute ago, there's a benefit to the familiarity, comfort among faculty and staff, and I think that that's certainly beneficial. The other thing I'm thinking about, current superintendent has not been here for 10, 15 years, such that you want to say, well, maybe we should do a search because we've had the same person for so long. You just did a search, you found someone you're very satisfied with, there was a team created under that person, so there's some continuity there. Let's continue that rather than have a systemic change in leadership so quickly. So those are some of the positives of that. The negative of a succession or a internal candidate, you don't see all the possible candidates. When you do a search, whether whomever you use to do your search, an outside entity, be it BOCES or a consulting firm, they will advertise in multiple publications. They'll get applicants from all over the state, maybe even the country, who know Schenectady, want to be a part of Schenectady and the growth of Schenectady. So if you do an internal succession plan, you're not going to have the advantage of seeing who all those possible candidates are. And, you know, sort of dovetailing that, you are limited in your selection. If you're going to stay internal, you're limited to the people who are currently working here who have a school district leadership and SDL certificate and can fill that role. So those are, and, you know, I strain to think of other negatives of the internal succession, but those are the ones I came up with. Switching gears to the other option, doing a search and doing a, you know, a sort of search outside of the district. You have a full process you engage that allows you to see candidates from all over, as I said a minute ago, the state, the country, whomever. You might get new ideas from a new leader. They might decide, you know what, I'm in Schenectady, I worked in an urban district before, this is how things worked where I was, let's implement those. You know, tapping that larger candidate pool might get you there. The negatives of having a search, I think one of the biggest ones would be timing and, well, I'll say time and timing. Maybe that's one, maybe that's two. And what I mean is, realistically, if you do a search, the first thing that the board will need to decide on is who will do the search. It's possible you could use BOCES. It's possible you could go outside and do a search consultant. If you hire a search consultant, you might want to do an RFP for a search consultant so that you can ensure that you have 2 or 3 possible search firms that you could then choose from. And that alone will take time. I would not if you did that, and let's say you didn't use BOCES, it would conceivably take you certainly a month, if not more, to do a full RFP for search firms, interview them, or probably more than that really, to do a search, and search for firms, interview them, decide who you're gonna want, and then start that. So you're not starting that process for a couple of months. In terms of then seating a new superintendent, I think realistically, the best you would be able to do is get someone who will start that position January 1st, 2025, maybe even June of 25, because you do the search, you have to set the criteria, they do the search, they bring it in, you have, you know, a variety of steps in the search process, and that takes time, and then it's very unlikely you're gonna find someone, a really qualified candidate, who'd be willing to start at an odd time of year. What I mean is, like, you know, October 1, November 1, if the person's a, you know, good quality person, they're gonna wanna give some time and some, you know, notice to their current district, and minimally not start until perhaps the 1st of January or the 1st of the new semester at the end of January. Those are just natural time breaks in the season, so to speak. The other possible negative of doing a search is if you've got a strong team now, some people on that team, and I really am speaking generically, I don't, you know one way or the other how people feel. It's entirely possible that people would say, you know, I'm not really into having a new school leader. I'm going to go look elsewhere for my own professional and personal growth. So you may lose some of your high-quality staff people if that happens. Very practically, I think we all know that this will be the 4th superintendent in Schenectady in 4 years. And you may see a diminished applicant pool as a result of that. I will tell you that is my conjecture, my prognostication, whatever you want to call it. I could be dead wrong about that. But, you know, you had a superintendent, you had an interim, you now have current superintendent, so this will now be the 4th person since 2020. And there might be really good candidates out there who might say, you know what, there may be a really good explanation for each one of those changes, but that seems a little bit too volatile for me. I'm going to stay out of that search. I've seen superintendents say that in the past. So, you know, some of the other things that occurred to me, and, you know, again, and BOCES is an absolute option to do the search, and they do it very well. If you do a search firm, it's going to cost you probably $25,000, I would think. So those are some of the back of the envelope kind of pros and cons that I was thinking were important to consider for both categories, the search and the internal candidate. So if anybody's taking notes on all of that, I guess you'd probably see that there's more pros to the internal candidate versus the search, but I just want to be on the record as saying it. I defer to the board entirely on that. I don't select board members. I don't select superintendents as your attorney, so whatever path you choose, it's one that has been done in the past in other districts as well as in this district. So, you know, I don't have a horse in the race, so to speak. I truly came up with those pros and cons just because those are the things that I think are really relevant to the consideration of the decision. So I will stop there and be happy to have a dialogue about any of that and any questions or anything you guys think I may have missed.
Okay, so thank you, and I would like to remind the BOE of our work agreements before we do have the discussion. So again, we agree to maintain a focus on what's best for our students. One mic, one voice. Ensure a safe space for all views to be expressed, treating each other, staff, and guests respectfully. Make a commitment to effective deliberations, each one listening and considering with an open mind. While others are allowed to express their points of view, even if one disagrees. And then I did add 2 others for today. Let's be mindful not to mention specific names or allude to particular individuals. And questions should specifically focus on Mr. Gerhardt's presentation. And our agreed protocols are as follows. Invite each BOE member to ask 3 questions and/or comments at a time to allow all voices and wonderings to be shared. After you've asked or shared your 3 questions and comments, I ask that you pause and allow your fellow BOE members to have an opportunity to share. BOE members are welcome to pass, and after the first line of questioning, we can re-invite those who have passed to ask questions. If others have questions after the 3-question protocol, we will open the floor for additional Q&A if time permitting. We will now open up the floor for questions and comments from the board. The board is encouraged to share their thoughts and position in relations to the various processes discussed by the attorney. Anyone wants to start first?
I don't like the look. I only have one comment.
Okay, Board Member Jamaica.
Sure. I want to say thank you, Douglas, for sharing that information, not just with us, but publicly, and thank you, Bernice. Because I think one of the things that we struggle with is our transparency, and making sure that whatever we're doing, what does that process look like that allows trust within the community, within our staff, within the whole community, parents and students. And this is a huge decision for us to make. It is not an easy one, I think, because of the history of, you know, how many we've had. Yeah, it's really, it's thank you, and it's a lot for us to consider. And I think we'll take the time to digest and make the right choice.
Can I go?
Sure. Board Member Erica.
No, I just thought a few interesting things that were pointed out, kind of a 2 pros on either side, like the outside search and the internal search, which almost leads to another pro for the internal search. Is one of the pros with the internal is, like, you know, uninterrupted continuation of work. And then, Douglas, one of the pros you said for an outside search is, you know, a new superintendent who might have new ideas, right? But the way I look at that is in relation to the uninterrupted continuation of work, because we've had a lot of new ideas happen, and we really haven't gotten to see any of those come to fruition and enough data to see, is it working or not? So then, in my opinion, having a new person come in with new ideas who could potentially just wipe all of that to the side, also with that 4 and 4 years, as we get a stable ship, kind of a big wave comes again. And with 4 and 4 years, a lot of our staff and our students even, because things keep changing, really deserve a steady ship. That was a good analogy.
I like that analogy.
So just one of my first thoughts. That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Board Member Erica.
I do think those 2, and I did paint on the search, I did paint that as a positive, the new ideas, but I think you raise an extremely valid point that you kind of, and that's really, I think, a board decision. You know, are we looking for yet more new ideas, or are we at a point in the district and in our time here that we want to see what we've already initiated come to fruition and play out. So I think, yeah, I guess that really could be, the new ideas could actually be a negative. I didn't paint
Right,
it that way,
that-
but
yeah,
yeah,
the
that's
way.
absolutely true.
I have a question,
Sure.
comment. So I'm really torn. Sorry. Okay, I'm really torn. I totally see the benefits of hiring internally. I do think that there are some good candidates. But then there's that, even though it's only like one pro or one con, I guess, in the internal search, it feels like it's weighing a little heavier to me that we don't know, like I'm not saying that there is, but there could be, you know, someone who's really great and just as dedicated, you know, like we got that with the current superintendent, and it just, you know, life happens and it is what it is, and, you know, now we're here. So I'm just really torn between the two. I wish that there was a way, and maybe there is, like, is there a way that we can consider both? Like, if we do a search, does that mean that we can't consider internal candidates?
No, no. If you were to do a search, then anybody who's qualified for the position could apply, including anybody who's currently working in the district. So a search is not exclusive. In other words, it's not to exclude anyone who's here. You could do a search, and anybody who has a school district leadership certificate and is therefore legally qualified to serve in that role and has an interest in it can apply.
Okay, thanks.
Now,
And-
sometimes when there is a search, you know, the first step of it would be, you know, is there anybody internal who we would like to consider before we go outside? That often will happen. And, you know, I've seen that happen. Look, I see Mike Silvestri in the audience. So, hey, Mike, you got an administrative certificate. Would you like to be the principal of XYZ building? You know, he hasn't shaken his head no, so I guess it's a possibility. But that happens as well. You know, we know that we have a really solid faculty member who's also certified. Maybe they'd like to make that jump. So that is certainly something, and that kind of is a backhanded way of saying maybe you look internally first, and if there isn't anybody, then you do the search. That's something that's commonly done.
Okay, and a follow-up question to that I have is, you know, in an effort to, you know, sort of maintain and retain, you know, those passionate people who really dedicate themselves to the school district, is it possible, is it feasible, is it going to like totally, you know, kill the candidate pool if we make it a requirement within a certain period of time for them to move into the school district?
So residency is a funny thing. Some school districts require it, some don't. Surprisingly, there are some school districts in the North Country that have been insistent upon it for years, and you would think maybe that's less of a concern, but small population want to be involved in the community. I think city school districts are a little bit more common, but I honestly, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it could. If someone, and you know what the easy example is? The easy example is, you know, I want to be the superintendent of let's Shenandoah, because we know that person's not going anywhere. But I live in Ballston Lake, and I love my house on Ballston Lake, and I'm not moving. Well, I'm not going to move, you know? I can commute there pretty easily. So, like, that you might inhibit the pool that way. But if someone's moving from out of the area and they have to move in, you know, I think my experience is that when that's happening, a superintendent is willing to move into the district and say, yeah, you know, I'm committed to it, and I'm going to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And walk the walk meaning be a resident. But yeah, short answer is yes. It could reduce your applicant pool if someone is very contented in where they're living. But if you make that a requirement, I think you're just going to get the people who are willing to do it. So, and it's not uncommon. So I think someone who's applying to be a superintendent understands if that's a requirement on the sheet of what we're all looking for. They get that. It's not like no one's ever asked that. It's asked quite frequently.
Okay, thank you.
I have.
Board Member Vivian?
So I think to piggyback off of Amanda's point about the residency potentially being a requirement, I think it's fair to say that there are many within our district, both in the community and our faculty, who feel as though Schenectady has a history of being used as a stepping stone. And that there may be many who are looking for, show me the dedication. Show me that you're not just going to be here for a few years and then walk away. And I feel like that's very, very important if we're talking about consistency and continuity and stability. Show me that you're actually dedicated to our students and to our community. So I think I do understand and agree with where she's coming from. I don't know if there's really a practical way to balance that out as far as not limiting our application pool if we were to decide to do a search. I don't know if that's possible, but I definitely think that that's something we should consider.
It's interesting you say that. I've worked with school superintendents and school districts throughout New York State for a very long time. I've never heard Schenectady referred to as a stepping stone. I've kind of seen it, I think a lot of folks from my viewpoint see it as a capstone. You mean 10,000 students, you've got a lot of diversity, you got some challenges, both fiscally and otherwise. I mean, fiscally maybe a little bit less now. So when you come from, you come from a 5,000 student district, a robust district, you're doubling the size to come here. And my experience with superintendents is they like the challenge, they like the educational challenge and the nuances of a population like a city school district offers. I've actually never heard of it, and I don't mean to say you're wrong. You know what people say. I've never heard it referred to as a stepping stone. The only place it's a stepping stone for maybe would be like Chancellor of New York City, or, as we're living right now, one of the big five. And I bet a lot of people who aren't really familiar with schools would think Schenectady is one of the big five, So the big seven, the big five plus Albany and Schenectady, that's how I've always looked at Schenectady in all sincerity. So I would think someone coming from outside would say, that's where I'm going to land, I've been doing really well in my suburban school district. I'm ready for a new challenge, and that's it. So, I could be wrong, but I do think I see the leaders, the educators who look at moving superintendencies. I would characterize Schenectady as a capstone more than not, because it's so big. Like, where else are you going to go?
No, I definitely feel like that's a fair point. It's another side to the argument.
Absolutely, yeah. We're living it, right?
Mhm.
Yonkers is considerably bigger than Schenectady, so I get that. And I get is that going to happen again?
Right. Second comment that I had to piggyback off of Erica's point that she had made, and I agree. Do we really want, if we were to go with a new candidate, would we be running the risk of having somebody come in with new ideas and completely changing the shift in the direction of the district? To play devil's advocate for the other side to that argument, I think we should consider, are we really pushing for such a dedication to one lens of how the district should be run, and as far as policies being made, do we really want such a dedication to one lens for everything, that we could potentially miss out on a different option, that we could potentially miss out on a candidate who can say, hey, been there, done that. I've seen this, and I know what direction this is going in, and this isn't going to work. We really should be doing this instead.
Yeah.
Again, just to play devil's advocate and make another side to that argument.
No, that could totally happen. That could happen. You get the new person in here and they say, I see what you're doing, I see the programs you're putting in place, and you know what, I did that in this district and it didn't really work, here's how I would like to change it. Now, the other facet of that more broadly is, typically you will ask a superintendent to provide you with a one-year plan, an entry plan, like what are you going to do when you first start? Extremely common in the search process. What's your entry plan? In fact, I would suggest you insist upon it. Like, you want to know what a new superintendent, whether it's an internal person or a search, you want to insist that person have that, because you, as the policy-making body, as the board, you want to know what that game plan is going to be. And then that would also probably have even a 3-year horizon or a 5-year horizon. What's that look like too? Obviously, that would be a little bit more general, not as specific and granular as the one-year plan, but something to think about. And frankly, Vivian, you just brought the idea to my mind. If we are content or satisfied with some of the direction the school district is going in now, if that's made known to potential candidates from outside, that may discourage them from continuing, because they may say, well, the board clearly has this direction, and they're telling me this is the direction, so they don't want, idea 1, 2, and 3 that I have to improve, academic performance or fiscal management, or whatever it is. So someone might be dissuaded if they know that that's, where we are. But you could have someone do that too. Say, I hear what you're doing, I see what the board did with the new old superintendent, didn't work where I was, let's try this. So then, and I don't know how that fleshes out down into the both the district leadership and the building leadership and the teaching ranks as well. So that could be, on one hand a negative and on one hand a positive, right?
No, 100%. So again, just going back to my initial statement, are we really dedicated to one sole lens on how we want things to be done, that we could potentially
Yeah.
miss out on
You could.
a better way of doing things? Because we're not the education experts.
Nope.
But we don't have experience with leading a district.
Yeah.
Somebody else could. So just trying to look at both sides of this.
So the short answer to your question, yes. So I'm not going to lawyer the answer and give you, well, according to this case. No, yes, that absolutely could happen.
Bernice, based on that, it's prompted my second and third question. New ideas, one, aren't bad. And I don't think we are a board who shies away from new ideas. Just if we decide that we want to move forward with an internal candidate, I don't think we're looking for a robot. I don't think we're looking for someone that's just going to be like, I'm going to do everything that we already said we were going to do, and that's it. I have no new ideas. I think we would be absolutely terrified, right? Because the person, whoever they are, I hope we expect to have the same expectation we had from the last person, to continually look at what we're doing, make assessments, and then if necessary, be like, this is where this needs a tweak, or, this isn't going into trajectory that we expected, and those new ideas become a plus. So when we were talking about the search versus the internal, I put new ideas on both sides and put plus minus, because it's going to depend on the person. Are we in a relatively good place? Yes. Do we think we have everything right? Hell to the no. And so whoever the person is, I expect them to have new ideas. Because at some point, something's going to give. There's all types of things we are working on right now that we haven't even fully started implementing. There's a building that's about to be a 9th grade academy. So I hope that however we get the person, there should be new ideas, right? And that it is based on their assessment of what's happening, their knowledge of their skills and understanding from their history, but also very specifically, Schenectady. Because I've heard Bernice say it a couple times, we're Schenectady. What works someplace else might not work here. So whoever it is, however we get to that space, the new ideas, the moving forward with the things that we know are working, it's not necessarily a good or a bad. It depends on the person. The other piece, I want to plus what Vivian said, Douglas. It may not be that people in the education industry are having conversations about Schenectady being a stepping stone. It absolutely is the sense that parents and community members have been voicing. And it's not just right now.
No,
And it is
heard.
a strong concern, which is why I think it's that much more important that we're having this public conversation, that we are being as transparent as we can be, right? because we've been hurt as a community.
Yeah.
We've been hurt, and that pain is real, it is visceral, and we're never going to have full certainty, but our commitment as board members, we serve our students and families, and we hear from them, why are we treated like a stepping stone? Why are we treated like we're not good enough? How come people don't want to stay here? It is heard. It's heard a lot, and it's not new. So thank you, Vivian, for lifting that up. Again, people that are at the state level or sitting on different boards may not be thinking in that way because of the positionality of us as a district, 10,000 students, and it means something to other people in a larger scale of Schenectady within New York State, in our community. It means something. So that's my 3.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. Like I said, my perspective on Schenectady, what I shared about saying it's a capstone of a school leader's career, is because I think that would be how some school leaders will view it. It's a large district, it's a diverse district, it has faced challenges over the years. Candidly, every school district faces challenges over the years. But, that's how I think educators view it. And I'm sorry to hear that some folks, that you're hearing that people think, well, we're a capstone, we're a stepping stone district. I don't know where you're really gonna go from Schenectady, other than one of the few that we mentioned. And the other point you made, I think, is a valid one, that you want new ideas, whether it's an internal person or an external person. And to that point, you're hiring a leader. You're not hiring a manager, robot, whatever word you want to use. It's like the difference between a job and a career. A job, you punch in and out, and that's what you do. A career, that's your profession. So you undoubtedly will get new ideas from anybody you select and decide this is the person we want, because whether they're internal, external, they're going to come in and say, this is my view of education, my view of how you educate the whole child, and this is how we do it, and this is what I think we should do. Please consider,
Board Member Kathy?
I'm trying to think of how to reduce my questions to 3.
Commas.
We'll come back around, though.
I've been on 3 search, actually 4 searches, and I want to have you, Douglas, speak about the matter of closed and open searches as they are conducted by districts, and using a DS or using a search firm or
Sure.
that, because I think that's some of the thing that goes to trust and whatever, and this is one of the and also your applicant pool, and this is one of the items that I think I can make some comments about after you comment.
Yeah, so briefly, the differentiation between a closed search and an open search, you do a search that's external in terms of, getting candidates from other places. A closed search, it's confidential. In other words, the applicants are confidential, and that's often preferred by some potential applicants because they don't want their current employer to know that they may be considering leaving, because that could have a negative impact on where they are. So the closed search, in essence, is it's closed, it's confidential, the public, and from the Schenectady standpoint, the public won't know who the finalists are until there's 2, maybe 3. So you might have a dozen people before the board, you'll narrow it down to half a dozen, and then you'll narrow it down to maybe 2 finalists. At that point, it's just, it's indicated to the 2 candidates. At the point that we're going to be, you're a finalist, it becomes public. But every step of the process before that is closed. And, there are some advantages to allowing the board to narrow down the candidates and figure it out, and then you start having like those open forums and meet the unions and meet the faculty and the community for the 2 people who are left. An open search, you're searching, and the applicant pool may not immediately be known if you get 30 applicants, but once you narrow it down to like the dozen I just said, that becomes known, everyone knows who the candidates are, and there's a little bit more interaction with the community and the public when you do that open search. So, and the candidates who are applying are informed of which type of search it is at the outset, and that may dictate whether they apply or not. You know, someone who's really content where they are and might think, I'm gonna throw my hat in there, because that sounds like a neat job, but then they find out it's an open search, you know what? It's not that neat, I'm gonna stay where I am, because I don't wanna jeopardize anything potentially where I currently am, so.
And 12, 13 years ago, just as a comment, we followed the process of a closed search, but went to the through the process where we had come down to selecting 3 or 4, I don't remember exactly how many people, but then we had 3 groups of public individuals from all parts of Schenectady. I mean, people who worked here, people who lived here, and so on, so that it was, they made a selection, or they discussed among, they interviewed all the people that were coming, and then they decided among them that, you know, who they favored, or gave us recommendations. I mean, that was the process that was followed. And so there is a way to combine this, as you've indicated. My second comment is that using, and I've not worked with a search firm, where a search firm's been involved. I have been to NSBA meetings where search firms have presented, but New York State in general has not done that. And the reason is that the district superintendent of BOCES, that service is free to the district. And I'd like you to comment about the fact that, you know, they handle a lot of the mechanics of a search process, and also the vetting of candidates. And I think, to Vivian's point, it does give you outside view from educators how that candidate may be viewed, or something that might be known, you know, regarding their prior service in a district. And that's one of the considerations. I would also point out that because we are a rather large district, one of the concerns expressed is whether this, in the sense of a stepping stone, we've always tried, well, at least in my experience, and I think in general, there's been the idea that, this is not to say that any of the other reason is a problem, but that you might want the experience factor to be considered, the experience of being a superintendent looked at by people on the outside. So that's where I'm coming from, and I wondered if you'd comment about those pros, shall I say?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the first, in regards to who does the search, yes, you're absolutely right. The BOCES, the district superintendents of the BOCES, not just Cap Region, but the other BOCES around the state, have capacity to do searches, just as does a search firm. So the options, whether it's a closed search or open search, they exist for both, regardless who does the search. The DSs are very capable of doing searches. They're familiar with the superintendency as a job, and they often have connections from previous positions. They have connections with district superintendents around the state. If, you know, through those connections, they can, you know, say, hey, do you know someone in your region who might be interested? Let them know that we're, you know, doing a search for Schenectady, you know, suggest that they apply. And that happens with some frequency, and that happens across the state. So while your DS may be located in Cap Region BOCES, the reach of that person is certainly statewide through that network, which is certainly an advantage. I mentioned the cost of a search firm, not knowing if the board went down the road of doing a search, if you wanted to consider that, a search firm would cost you roughly what I suggested. So that's just something to keep in mind. The BOCES does not cost anything. You're absolutely right, Kathy. And that is a huge advantage, both because the individuals know how to do it, they have connections, and it doesn't cost you anything. So, yeah, you're valid points. In terms of being an experienced superintendent, that's a criteria that I would say the board needs to decide. Do we want someone who has past experience working as a superintendent? Now, that experience as a superintendent certainly can vary among school districts.
Of course.
It's, I would say, differ being a superintendent of a large district, whether it's Schenectady, Shen, Saratoga, whatever, versus, I'm sorry, I just caught someone's eye over the podium. I'm sorry, you can't see me. I'm fun-sized, I'm not tall.
Fun size.
So the smaller district is really dealing with the exact same challenges and job description, so to speak, as a large district. That is, you're working for a board, you're working for not one person, but the board as an entity, and, you know, you gotta make sure that that's a good relationship in sustaining that. So that's entirely possible. Someone who's been a superintendent knows what that's like. They know what it's like to work for a board and to run a board meeting and to address issues in the various constituencies that you serve, be it the parents, the students, the faculty, the staff, the board. I mean, those are the 6 constituencies a superintendent really reports to in some way, shape, or form. Someone who hasn't been a superintendent doesn't necessarily have the experience of all of that.
But they could.
They could, and depending on who you're looking at, you might have a extremely adept deputy superintendent, associate superintendent, who's been very involved in a large number of, and I'm internally or externally. You may get an applicant from, you know, another 10,000 student school district who's been the number 2 or at the, you know, the number 2 level for a while, interacts with the board all the time, has a lot of responsibilities to the community, to the faculty. So while they may not have had the title superintendent without a qualifier or deputy associate before it, they know exactly what that job is about. So, you know, that's, I would submit that if you're a deputy superintendent of a decent-sized district or assistant superintendent of a decent-sized district, your experience may exceed that of a superintendent at a smaller district.
And I wouldn't disagree. I'm just saying that I think that's a factor that can perhaps be evaluated by someone outside of the board directly.
And you know-
I think a help would come from an outside evaluation on that.
You know, and
So-
Kathy, you did say something I didn't address. With respect to a search, and again, whether the district superintendent does it or whether the search firm does it, they become your agent with respect to gathering resumes,
Right.
gathering all of the documents that you want to see from someone who's an applicant, so that you're not doing it or your district clerk isn't doing it. Right now, Michelle's like, okay, good. But it's really important to know that because, you know, you really rely on the superintendent and then those who report to the superintendent to implement what you decide. When you're dealing with a search for a superintendent, you don't have that go-to person. When you do a search, the search consultant, whomever it is the person who becomes your agent, and they will tell you, we will gather all of the documents you want, we will screen it, we'll make sure it's, you know, ready for prime time, so to speak, so the board can look at it. So that's, I apologize, I didn't mention that before. That's a really important point, because you shouldn't walk out of here thinking, well, now are we doing the search? Erica's gonna capture all this and send it to us, and,
Yes.
you know. She didn't say that.
Exactly,
So, but that is a very important element of it.
exactly. I don't think I recall number 3, or I combined it in there before, so, so I'll reserve that.
Count of 3.
I did want to just make one comment, and I jotted this down. Our past situation, because I was also on the board with the last 3 superintendents, and our past climate environment situation is very different than what it is now. We went through several things, very complex, in addition to COVID, which is a major reason why we felt that we needed a search. Also, many of the pieces that are in place right now were not in place during that time. So I think we also have to think about our current situation is very different than the past. It's apples and oranges that we're comparing, and I think that's really important also to remember. Then the other thing too that I find very interesting is that a superintendent can have experience, but are they effective? Right? Because we're talking about experience. That really doesn't mean, and I was a teacher, I can have a lot of experience, 20 years of experience, but am I good? You know? So I think we have to be very mindful of the words that we're using to describe what we want from a superintendent and be very descriptive, right? Because I'm looking for a lot of different qualities, and I was thinking about that. So just because I think this is a good segue from what I've been hearing, I want someone who's student-centered. I want someone who's personable, dedicated, steeped in education, breathes and lives it, who's a systems thinker and connector. We have done a lot of systems work in Schenectady in the last several years, but a lot of those pieces are coming together currently in Schenectady. And that's because we have a strong team, and not just our executive team. We have staff who have bought into the vision. And again, nothing is, nothing is perfect, and I've said that. We're working on it, but we have a system that is working. The board has worked very hard to have these kinds of conversations, again, going back to what Jamaica, transparent and communicative. We may not agree all the time, and that's good, right? Because that leads us to good decision-making. So again, there's a lot I want to say, but I'm going to also keep to my 3-comment rule, so I'm going to pause and have other folks chime in, and then we'll continue. We have a lot of time still.
Okay, so I've been thinking a lot, and thank you, Douglas, for sharing all of this information with us. 2020, as a brand new board member and a parent of 3 students in the district, I lived through what that experience was to have someone in the interim role. And unfortunately, there were a lot of inconsistencies. There were some opportunities with communication. I think, one of the biggest things when I joined was the curriculum piece and how vastly different it was, building by building by building. We have created a path, right, over the past 2.5 years under Superintendent Soler that has been steady and seems to be putting us on a path where we're starting to get some momentum. So I'm thinking a lot about the comments that are coming across from the board as far as, what are we going to do if this person hasn't had, that title as superintendent. And I think that the team that currently exists has worked very closely alongside, right? Our superintendent is very familiar and what have you with all of those subtle nuances, right, on the day-to-day work, because they live it, they breathe it, and they're doing the work that's helped to improve just a lot of the processes that we just did not have in place previously. I'm grateful for it because I have, my last child coming through the district. You can feel it. I personally have been able to see and feel the difference with, who we have in the superintendent role. And so I am interested in continuing that path. And everybody kind of took some of my ideas, Board Member Jamaica had said something specific around, whoever we select, whether it's an outside or an internal search, they're a new person and they're coming with their own fresh ideas. But what I do like about, and I'm being very forward here and honest, I do like an internal look because I understand that the administrative team has done outstanding work and that they also know kind of what's going on. So I'm interested to see what these folks have to say, as we kind of continue to look into what option we select. But I do think it's really important to understand that the disruption of having someone step in that interim type process or not having someone because we're doing this search, it's a disservice to our kids and our families in the community when we've lived that, and I would prefer not to go back to that. Just my 2 cents.
I still, oh, go ahead.
Board Member Vivian and then Board Member Erica.
The teacher has spoken, you're next.
I just wanted to, I just had one last comment. Board President Bernice, I think that you brought an excellent point about effectiveness of whoever it is that we decide to choose, whether internal or external. With that effectiveness, this just keeps ringing through my head is leadership skills. Not only your ability to effectively lead the district, but also your ability to effectively choose leaders, that are going to serve under you in the building level. I speak to faculty members who still feel as though they work under toxic leadership. And I don't know the whole story, we never know, but it's still a common resounding theme, even after being under Superintendent Soler. There's still toxic leadership within the building. So you can have the accolades and the qualifications on paper, but do you know how to manage people? And regardless of what is on paper, do you know how to spot out the potential for ineffective leadership? Do you have the ability to spot and weed out not having people skills? That's crucial when you're managing people. And regardless of what's on paper, yes, it took you talent to get to where you are on paper, but, and I've made this comment before, talent can sometimes take you where your character cannot keep you. And I know that these issues are not exclusive to Schenectady, but in any leader that we choose, because of so many people having these feelings for so long, I feel like that's very, very important for us to look at and for us to bring to the table with whoever it is that we decide to go to. Are you going to be able to weed out the lingering toxicity, and what are you going to do to continue to move this district in a more positive direction? So I just wanted to say that.
Vivian, do you mind if I interject for 1 minute?
My name's Erica, but no.
Erica. Sorry, Erica. I do want to just say one thing. It's very complex. A school district cannot just fire someone. A superintendent cannot just fire someone. And there's also unions that are involved in it, and there's a process. I can say from being on the board prior, there weren't effective processes, and that has changed. And that could be for a variety of reasons. I'm not trying to, but I understand the concern that folks have out there, right? Our members, whether they're administrators, teachers, paras, et cetera. But the process, and I think a lot of folks don't realize, it is a very, very intricate, complex process to get rid of someone. It's not, oh, this person did this, they're done. There has to be due process with, so I just wanted to just share that and just
Oh, yeah,
highlight
of course. I wasn't, and I apologize, I should have been more specific in what I was saying.
Okay.
I'm not talking about someone just coming in and firing people. That's not what I'm saying, especially not with this economy. But what I'm saying is working towards changing the culture in the building, and then when you're looking to potentially hire somebody new, if the need for leadership should arise, for new leadership to arise in a building, how effective are you? How capable are you at choosing effective leadership, someone who is effective with managing people, instead of just looking at the candidate that has the most accolades on paper and then giving the position to that person?
Thank you. Board Member Erica?
Yeah, that's my name, thank you. A lot of us have, or not me yet, because I'm speaking now, talked about, the experience piece, and I really liked your point, Bernice, because you can have a job for a long time, and that doesn't mean you're effective at it. And I don't know who said it first, but talking about the leader piece and really having someone in that role who can get people to continue to buy in, because as you spoke, the culture and climate is a lot different than it was before. And change takes time, and buy-in takes time, especially from people, as you were just saying, who feel like they've been wronged for so long. And to be able to continue that buy-in on the trajectory we're going, I think is really important. And especially, this other word, I don't know who said it, right? And so that seamless transition where some of the things they might not have the experience with, they have an experienced superintendent who's going to help them, guide them into that role, as opposed to having an interim 2025, maybe the soonest we would be able to hire someone, I think I'm hard pressed to believe that's not going to harm the culture and climate, and then there's not going to be a lot of disruption. That's my 3 now.
Thank you, Board Member Erica. Now I'm going to say
Should
Erica
I,
aloud.
can I cash in on all the times I didn't use my 3? So I think I had about 32 more comments.
All right.
up my sleeve.
I love it.
I wrote down your quote.
Board Member Amanda?
Okay, hold on, now I need to remember what it was. Oh, right, so I guess regardless of what decision we actually make, whether it's just go strictly internal or a combination of both, just considering any candidate who's qualified and interested, part of our selection process should be making sure that they are willing to sort of learn before they change, like learn like what we're doing now and then decide what, in their opinion, you know, what works, what doesn't, working well with other members of their team to make sure that what they may be changing is actually the best thing for the community. Because I don't want to get blinders on in thinking that, you know, an outside candidate is going to cause so much disruption that it's going to do a disservice to our community and to our children. And if they end up doing that, then we probably chose wrong, because I don't think a new candidate coming in should cause that much disruption, regardless whether it's internal or not. You know, new ideas, I think it takes time. It's important that we choose someone who is willing to, you know, really learn everything that there is to know. And even, I think what we were talking about before, like even internal candidates can have new ideas and there could be a disruption. So you kind of have that risk either way. So I just really don't want to get so blinded in one direction that we, you know, decide, well, it's just easier to go this route than exploring like a larger candidate pool or something.
Can I just clarify one thing to make sure I didn't misspeak? Just because you pointed that out, Amanda, and I appreciate that. When I said disruption, I wasn't referring to a new person coming in and disrupting everything. I was referring to that time in the meantime of having to find the candidate, having an interim, the disruption and that piece, just to make sure I was being clear. So thank you for pointing that out.
And I echo what Erica says. That was the disruption. The disruption really was in the fact that there was no leader at that time.
Yeah.
You know, we did have an interim, but this was very, very difficult to kind of wade through those things, and the impact that it had on the students and the families and the things that happened at that time. It was very disruptive. But yes, we get someone in the role, you know, obviously they're gonna steer the ship. Whoever said it first.
Boom, ships.
Okay.
Board Member Amanda?
I guess I have a general question for anyone who wants to chime in, I guess. With the current setup and the direction that we've been moving in, and the fact that we essentially have successors lined up if we wanted to go in that direction, what would everyone's opinion be on using that sort of chain of command or that level of succession for the interim, you know, while we're exploring the total candidate pool, including internal members who are interested in the position? I mean, would that be an option? Like, I don't know, I guess, what the risk would be, or everyone's opinion.
It's an option, but I'll open it up to board members to share their thoughts around that.
I think we should pause on that.
Okay.
I think we should what?
Pause, she said. About interim? Okay. Okay, so I did want to circle back, if you
Sorry,
don't
can I-
mind.
oh,
Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
sure. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, I wasn't looking like specifically like at certain people, but just the idea of if someone was interested, like from a board perspective, like if one of them was interested in like taking that role on, is that something that we could explore, or is it getting too personal?
Well, I will say this. During Vice President Nohalani kind of talked about it. We did have an interim. And it was, so it was during COVID. And I'll pause there, and then we could talk more afterwards. But we did have an interim during COVID. Okay. I did want to circle back a little bit about, I want to just kind of highlight that we've had an opportunity, because I don't know if all of you have ever heard of the Dog and Pony Show, right? The Dog and Pony Show, kind of like you look good on paper type of thing, the dog, you know. So what's interesting, that when we went through the search, there are people, I mean, it's customary. Everybody's going to do the Dog and Pony Show, and they're going to share and say the things that they want you to hear. And what's really hard is that you have to decipher through that, like, is that real? You know, did they really do this? You know, but one of the things that makes me think about this process too is that we have been seeing for the last 2 years many of our internal folks not do the Dog and Pony Show, but they have presented to us. We have been out there and seen them in the you know, doing their thing in the community. We have seen them with families. We have seen them at meetings. So for me, it's really interesting too, and again, this is me reflecting, and I'm reflecting out loud. I've personally seen all of it in terms of in meetings, in events, in community events, at schools, talking to different officials. So I have seen firsthand, and I know many of you have too, I have seen firsthand what our folks are capable of doing with a search. And I'm not saying that there's no validity in a search. I just feel at this point, because we have seen what our staff can do, that for me, I really feel that an internal would be best suited for Schenectady for many of the reasons that many of you have said. And for me, it's because I've seen them. I've seen them in action. All of them. I've seen them in action doing their thing. So again, I'm going to just use that metaphor, Dog and Pony show, or actually demonstrating what they're capable of doing. With any person that comes into the district, we don't know. I mean, and that's, you know, we just don't know. We know what they told us, and we know the rumors, because in education, there's so many rumors that go around, and we hear the rumors. But if we have staff members that we've seen and that have done a great job or an excellent job in the different facets of being a leader, that's one of the things that I'm really thinking about during my decision.
We're not gonna undercover boss and go to every single district of every single applicant and watch them on their daily on how they perform to see if it matches with what they tell us in the interview?
No.
No?
So
No.
that
Unless you want to
actually,
do a road show for about 3
Ma'am,
years.
Ma'am,
just to chime in for 2 seconds, I think, you know, to put it, to add to what you said, you really, one of the advantages of, and I didn't say this, but I will now, because you prompted it, one of the advantages of going internal is that you have, in effect, had internal candidate, someone who's been here for 2 years, 3 years, you basically had a de facto interview for that period of time.
You have evidence.
You do, you know?
Evidence.
So that, and you're right, you know, sometimes you know, put on your best foot, your best suit and your best face forward when you're interviewing, but, you know, that long-term interview, so to speak, is valuable. And Jamaica, that, we might talk offline, that sounds like a really good business model to be like undercover boss and superintendent, you know, hire us, we'll pretend we're administrators or teachers. I'd probably last like 2 classes, but we could get a sense at least of, you know, I know what that guy's like.
I mean, I could just be a para everywhere.
I might be better off in that role too.
Well, I think that if we talk so much about grow your own, I think this would be, if that's the road we decide to take, like the ultimate practice of grow your own,
Yeah.
because we're pulling from our own.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you said that, because that's what we talk about at our board meetings quite often, about growing our own, because we know we have the expertise in-house. Any other comments, questions?
Well, you might start a trend too, that, you know, this, if you do pick an internal person, becomes a superintendent, stays for a period of time, and over time, like the next person, you may look again and say, you know, we've created this culture and this climate where we do grow our own, so now the next person is almost an obvious choice because they've been with us for a while, grown in their own role, and now they can ascend as well. So that definitely is a model that can be very attractive.
To that point, I also think that it's crucial for, if we were to go the internal route, we need like a starting lineup, like your starting lineup, for that team. So we're gonna do the grow our own. There's obviously vacancies as people are moving up, so we
Right.
continue to
Yeah.
recycle and build and grow and train and everything else. So I just think that that's another important piece to look at.
Board Member Amanda?
And I know that I've been like talking a lot about expanding the search just to make sure that we consider all the possible, pieces to the puzzle. And I don't mean for that to sound like, potential candidates that we have internally aren't perfectly qualified and that I wouldn't, fully commit to. But with Vivian's point that she was just making with the grow your own and like just making sure that, whoever backfills those, I guess the lower positions, that we, like, how involved is the board in that? Because I just don't want to get to the point where it's just assumed that we.
Yeah, we're not involved with the hiring of folks. So the only person that we are totally involved and are responsible for hiring is the superintendent. Then the superintendent, we hire someone that we feel that will make those good choices, and we can share some of our thoughts around that, but it's the superintendent that hires all the other folks.
Okay.
So we really have to do a good job.
Yes. Any other comments, questions? I did want to make another comment, and I think, Amanda, you had mentioned, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, or I just want to mention that when you hire, and I'll use the teacher metaphor first, and then I'll switch it to the superintendent. When you're hired when I was a teacher, it took me a solid 5 years to really know what I'm doing. Between the content, I may know my content, but it's a different than delivering it to our students and how to engage our students. So it took about 5 years. They say 3, but it's really 5 years. So even with an experienced superintendent coming in, there is a curve, a long, a hard curve, and it could be from 3 to 5 years as well for that person to get their footing. Doesn't mean that they don't have the effectiveness, but it takes that some time. And what can happen during that time is kind of like what board member Erica, and I believe Vice President says, there's a lag there between that time. And I mean, it's expected that someone is going to need time to learn. Even if we have an internal person, there's going to be that time where they get to learn new things because they're in a new role, but they already have the understanding of where we're going in Schenectady. So I just wanted to mention that yes, an experienced person is awesome, effective, and experienced, but it doesn't mean that when they come in, they'll be able to get things going right away, because they're also going to have to learn our school district and the nuances and the personalities and build relationship and build trust.
I have a question.
Board
Sorry.
Member Vivian?
We go with an internal candidate, okay, this, for example,
Okay.
and they have, in theory, 3 months to train under our current superintendent before they're completely on their own. Is 3 months a little ambitious? Because even though they may have been working with the superintendent and working with the community, their responsibility wasn't on them for that whole time. So, number one, is 3 months a little too ambitious, realistically speaking, for someone to be completely prepared to fly solo? 2, if we feel like it may be a little ambitious and we really want our person to be successful, right? We can't have expectations if we're not going to provide resources to match those expectations. Would we be opposed to potentially having someone to serve on a consultant level for a little bit of time after May, just to make sure that whoever we have in that position is really, really, really 1,000% prepared and strong in their role?
Yeah, that's an excellent, yes, I guess is the short answer to that question. The second part, is 3 months enough time to ramp up and become the superintendent? Probably not, but I think you'll probably find a superintendent who's been a superintendent for a number of years probably says, I still have stuff to learn. It is a great idea to have a consultant who's sort of a mentor, if you will, to the new superintendent. I'm actually working with a number of new superintendents, all of whom have mentors because it's the first time they're in the role. It's an extremely common thing to do. It's encouraged professionally by the professional associations. And I'll say the New York State Council of School Superintendents initiated a number of years ago and still runs it, a new superintendent program, which is a year-long program where new superintendents get additional professional development, they, for a day or two every couple months or so, and, sort of en masse, but they have a very robust and very effective program for that, so I would recommend that as well. But it is both a good idea and commonplace for a new superintendent to have a mentor that they can call and say, I've got this issue before me. It could be finance, it could be personnel, it could be educational. Here's how I'm thinking about addressing it. Could you give me some feedback? Purely confidential conversation. The board doesn't necessarily know that the superintendent is contacting their mentor. It's just an ongoing relationship. And there are a number of superintendents out there, both working and retired, who serve in those roles and serve it very effectively. And it really does make for a very successful superintendent. And it can happen, you can have a mentor for a year, 2 years, whatever. But yeah, the 3 months maybe it's aggressive to say, all right, I know it all for 3 months, because you won't,
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from board members? Okay, so I will call an executive session. An executive session is now called for the purpose of discussing a particular person or persons. I'll accept a motion to go into executive session. May I have a motion?
So moved, Erica.
Thank you, Board Member Erica. Second?
Second, Amanda.
Thank you, Board Member Amanda. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries.